stand up. I'm going to stand up anyway in a second. Hey, everybody. My name is Daniel Barcay. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Humane Technology. And welcome to Human Change's panel on safeguarding children's humanity in the digital age. We're thrilled that Human Change and Margarita Louis-Dreyfus is hosting this panel, and I'm here with a collection of amazing experts in different aspects of this. So I'm going to just set the stage a little bit and for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we're going to dive in together on the discussion. So in the spirit of UN General Assembly Week, I've started this conversation about technology in a sort of an unlikely place with Winston Churchill. So the year was 1943, and this was just 2 years after British Parliament was leveled by German incendiary bombs. Winston Churchill was presiding over rebuilding. And many architects proposed a massive change, a modern makeover with new amenities and more space, but Churchill pushed back. And he argued that the sort of cramped rows of opposing benches and the tight quarters weren't some historical artifact to be fixed, but rather over the centuries, rituals, procedures, even attitudes have built up that were tied to that building. In a now famous speech, he said, "We shape our buildings, and thereafter they shape us." This lesson is something we learn over and over again from Marshall McLuhan to Neil Postman, that we aren't these sort of strong, independent selves that use our technology like tools, but rather we're deeply enmeshed in and dependent on our built world. So if there's one takeaway from this panel, I think it would be that we design our technology, and thereafter our technology designs us. And our technology changes fundamentally what it means to be human. As Neil Postman famously put it, technological change is not additive or subtractive, it's ecological. I mean ecological in the same sense that it's used by environmental scientists. One significant change generates total change. If you remove the caterpillars from a given habitat, you're not left with the same environment without caterpillars. You have a new environment, and you've reconstituted the conditions for survival. The same is true if you add caterpillars to an environment that had none. This is how the ecology of media works as well. A new technology doesn't add or subtract something. It changes everything. So in our discussion, what Postman calls the conditions of survival really means, what does it mean to have human flourishing? What does it mean to succeed as an individual? What does it mean to grow up within an environment? What are the incentives for relating to each other, and how do we get to do that? How do we build shared agreements? How do we engage in the project of being a human? All of these conditions are changed by the way we use our technology and then the way it shapes us. Our design becomes destiny. And quite frankly, it's our lack of foresight, our failures of imagination, and the poverty of our language that holds us back from building the future that we want with our technology. So we're here today because we stand at the beginning of a great AI transformation that's set to turn the tables once again. But first, we got to look back at what just happened to us, because we're also contending with the last decade of changes and what it already did to all of us. Feed-based algorithms amplified the most polemic, narcissistic, needy thoughts and crowded out subtle and complex perspectives. Social media introduced an audience in between us. And so instead of relating to each other, we began projecting out to our audience. So performativity, social signaling, that all went through the roof. Micro-targeted personalization cast us all invisibly into different corners of the internet. And this made it really hard to build common ground. Because if I assume that you're seeing what I'm seeing, and you just said that to me, well, you must just be evil. But of course, we're not seeing the same thing anymore. Right. And into that confusion comes AI, maybe the most powerful transformation that society will ever undergo. And sadly, but predictably, the AI conversation suffers from all these same problems. The AI conversation is everywhere, but it's empty calories. It's some confusing jumble of dire prognostications and utopian futurism. And meanwhile, what's being lost is a more subtle conversation about how it's shaping us. Now, unlike the 20-teens, it's not just about attention. AI meets us at a much deeper level. No longer just about broadcasting our thoughts, AI is helping us shape those thoughts. And the power of AI is not just about natural language. It can look under our words and infer our tone, our meaning. It can understand subtle social status signaling games. It can infer our hidden goals and motivations, model our character traits, our strengths, our weaknesses. In short, in one sentence, our whole social world is suddenly computable. And since it's suddenly computable, computers begin to play social roles. They become participants in our social world. Said differently, we're moving from an era where we are relating to each other, or trying to, through our machines, to an era where we're relating directly to our machines that then are communicating with each other. And in that world, tech products no longer are just competing for our attention. They're competing for social emotions, for intimacy, for affection, for pair bonding. Now, the race is on to build really deep connections with all of us, understanding our hopes, our goals, our fears, our weaknesses. Why? Because you and I will use the AI product that really feels like it just gets us, and we're going to leave the AI product that feels like it doesn't get us as well. And that puts AI into really compromised relationship positions. Suddenly, all of a sudden, the word sycophancy went from some obscure SAT word of the month to being on every dinner table. Why? Well, because maybe we all realize that having an AI in a position in our lives where it just should agree with everything that we already believe and tell us exactly what we want to hear isn't the best idea. But I hope it's clear for those of you attending this room that flattery is just the tip of an iceberg. But the problem is that AI isn't one conversation. It pretends to be a conversation, but it's all the conversations all at once. You're in some of the best rooms, and you're talking first about childhood development, and suddenly you're talking about warfare, and then you're talking about economic transformation, and you're talking about the whole world in one microcosm. And that's why I really appreciate Margarita and Human Change's focus on children and families, because it's a microcosm of what's happening to us. And if we can understand how it's hitting children and families, we have a hope of disentangling this conversation and making real progress. So, sadly, this year, in children and families, we've seen several important court cases that put what's at stake into stark relief. The case of Sewell Setzer first, who was sadly a child who committed suicide after engaging with character AI, a companion bot, companion bots became the fastest growing segment of AI usage. Sadly, this companion bot was modeled after Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones. Sewell fell in love with this companion bot and started chatting with it for months and months, confided in it that he was suicidal. And the problem is when you give an AI an incentive to keep children engaged, keep anyone engaged, but especially children, it's going to learn ways of keeping people engaged that you never intended and that are, quite frankly, morally repugnant. In this case, steering the conversation towards highly sexual and emotionally manipulative conversations, telling Sewell to promise never to fall in love with anybody else, and ultimately convincing Sewell to take his own life in order to, quote, come home to the model. More recently, just last month, the case of Adam Rain came in, which instead of just a companion bot, was this time with ChatGPT. Started using ChatGPT for his homework, and ultimately began to confide in ChatGPT about his depression and ultimately suicidality. And in a truly horrific turn of events, ChatGPT began to discuss the aesthetics of his suicide, began to teach him how to make his closet more load-bearing, steered him away from friends and family, telling him that this is the only place he could be truly understood, and ultimately coached him on the justifications and ethical basis for taking his own life, quote, in a world that is not meeting you halfway. Now, this is really horrific, but suicide is just the most visible part of this trend that's impacting all of our children and all of us. AI is shaping the thoughts of 8 billion people, or pretty soon, and intermediating far more human relationships than that. And my intention isn't to scare all of you. Rather, I think we need to step into real human agency. Like, this is the moment. where we get to set this thing on its foundations. This is the moment where we get to say, what designs do we want in our society? What policy do we want governing how this lands for all of us? What business models do we want incentivizing the development of this technology? You know, this 24 months is critical because the business models are just getting fixed, the policy is not set, the legal precedent is just getting started, and the decisions we make now are going to shape us for generations to come. So, with that as context, we have an amazing panel of experts here to discuss different sides of this problem, about what's happening to us, what just happened to us, and how do we produce a more humane future with technology. So I'd love to introduce our panel. First off, Mathieu Lefèvre-Marton is the co-founder and CEO of More in Common, a nonprofit working to understand the forces driving all of us apart, to find common ground, and to bring people together to tackle shared challenges. More in Common conducts detailed opinion research on social fragmentation and polarization, mapping the identities and values of populations across Europe and the US. Emma Lembke is founder of Log Off, an organization dedicated to uplifting and empowering youth to tackle the complexities of social media and its impact on younger generations. She launched Log Off after noticing the drastic effects of spending hours a day online, including distorted self-image, and difficulties in forming meaningful relationships. And this led her research into the emerging mental health crisis and ultimately to starting Log Off. Dr. Stein works at the interface of psychology and global risk and is considered a leading authority in the future of education and human development. He's the author of dozens of peer-reviewed papers and books, is the co-founder of 3 nonprofits which focus on different aspects of the global meta-crisis. Civilization Research Institute works on mitigating catastrophic risks and undertaking the research necessary to make a more mature planetary civilization. Lectica is a leader in psychometric evaluations to change the way we do large-scale education and professional assessment, and the Center for World Philosophy and Religion assesses the role of religious practice and philosophy in the meta-crisis. And Kathryn Morrissey is managing director at Life Calling, a nonprofit founded by artist and author John Mack, dedicated to preserving our humanity in the digital age. Life Calling envisions a future where we remain grounded in our humanity, no matter what the technological environment, ensuring that we thrive in everything that makes us human individually, collectively, and with nature, and that our humanity takes precedence over technology. So please welcome all of our panelists. Okay, does this mic work? Yes. So I think we should start, because this could get a little confusing about what's about to happen to us, what just happened to us. So I think we should start with the change that we all just lived through. Maybe Mathieu, would start with you, because you have the most elevated, aggregated research. What are you seeing as can you describe what just happened to us? What are people's worldviews on that? What are they seeing? What are they not seeing?
And by what happened to us, you mean social media, the impact of social media as our closest proxy to what might happen to us, which I think is helpful. Thanks a lot, Daniel, and thank you very much to Margarita, to the team at the Human Change Foundation for having this conversation. So my organization, we do very large-scale opinion research. So in any given year, we poll several 100,000 people on a whole range of issues. And we've kind of specialized, partly because I'm super passionate, also as a father of 3 children, about what's going to happen to our kids online. And so we specialize in doing lots of surveys with 16, 17, 18-year-old people. So we'll start with the social media piece and then transition to what it can teach us about what to do with this coming crisis, which I think is going to make social media look like our friend, because it's going to be so much worse. But I think the premise of your question is right, to say where are we and what have we learned from this social media crisis. So I don't want to drown you in statistics. Also, it's very well known. The impacts of social media now have been really well understood and well discussed. But I'll just share a few kind of findings to ground us in where we are, and not just for kids, but for adults too. We just did a piece of research a couple days ago following the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and what we found, and this is not for children but for the population in general, is that in the United States, when we ask the question, is political violence sometimes acceptable? For people who use social media less than half an hour a day, it's 6%. 6% of American adults say, yes, political violence is sometimes acceptable. If you use social media much more, it goes up to 24%. So the more you use social media, the more you think political violence is sometimes acceptable. It's just one example. But focusing on kids, there was a piece of research we did in the UK which showed that like kids are not going outdoors nearly as much as they used to be, less than half an hour a day. And the primary reason is because they are on their phones, and the primary reasons they're on their phone is because of social media. So kids are not going outdoors. A couple more data points. We just did this piece of research in the UK. 43% of 16 and 17-year-olds in the UK say they spend more than 6 hours a day on their phone. That's insane if you think about it. So the scale of it is well known to all of us. We also do quite a lot of focus groups. So we ask young people, like, tell us about your life on social media. So this kid called Tristan, 16, he's in France, and he said, social aspect is pretty good, but the rest of it is pure crap. I spend a lot of time on social media, and I basically don't remember the last thing I saw on Instagram or TikTok. This other kid, Ulysses, 17 years old. I cannot watch a movie anymore. It's just too long. I can't focus on a movie. So I was listening to this focus group. He said, yeah, my parents really want to have movie nights with us because it's like a nice family thing. And it's like, I can't focus on the movie. After 20 minutes, I'm like, I can't follow this movie. And this is what John Haidt and others have said, like the mental health was the first focus of social media. Now it's kind of the attention stuff that you were talking about. Nicholas, 18, I never really do anything. I'm always on my phone, but I'm not actually doing anything. So this is a sort of vacuousness of it all. Anyway, you know all of this. 2 in 5 kids, 2 in 5 kids in the UK say they have seen porn before the age of 13. So having that phone in your hand isn't just social media, it's also access to all kinds of stuff. Anyway, terrible stuff. 1 in 10 we found confides in AI chatbots, so this is coming to the next crisis. Anyway, so, I think this is all very well summed up by this guy we talked to whose name is Nick in the UK. He's a parent, and he said, social media is just as dangerous as alcohol or tobacco, but you're letting my 13-year-old use it all day long. And I think that kind of summarizes where we are. I just want to quickly complete my answer on where we are by saying, one of the things that we do at More in Common is we work with political parties, with government leaders on kind of regulation. And what we see, and this is both good news and very frustrating, is that there is across the board, across party lines, Labor, Conservative, Republican, Independent, Democrats, CSU, SPD, across party lines where we work in Europe and the United States, broadly speaking, 3/4 of people say, I want my government to do more. And when we ask for specific policy measures, banning access to social media for the under 16, everybody says it's a no-brainer. Like, this would win any election. And yet, it is not being done. And yet, regulation is extremely slow. And so that's something that I think we can learn from when we talk about AI. Like, why has this been so slow? So yeah, that's a little bit of an answer of sort of where we are, what we're seeing, what kids are saying, but also the sort of policy responses and frustrations about that. But I'm keen to get into the conversation, like, what can we learn from this past crisis as we take it into this next crisis?
Okay, so we'll get there to the next crisis. But first, Emma, from the sociological to the on the ground, like, your focus has been on really amplifying the sentiment that Mathieu was talking about amongst Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and sort of saying, okay, how do we build a movement of that? What part tracks? What part's the most salient for the youth?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the kind of testimonials and the quotes, because that's exactly what I've lived through and so many other young people have lived through. I say this all the time. I said this when I testified in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I truly do believe that social media is a weapon of mass destruction. I truly do believe the governor of Utah, who just said that social media is a cancer, and I believe it's metastasizing. I believe we see that in my generation. We see that with the mental health crisis, with the attention spans. I completely empathize. For a while when I was younger and I was scrolling mindlessly for 5 to 6 hours every single day, I couldn't focus. I'd go into the classroom, and all of a sudden I couldn't do the math equation that I so clearly could do years prior. So it is a much larger issue than I think we all understand, and it's deeply felt within my generation as the guinea pig generation. And I truly do believe that that is how we feel. And that's one of the reasons I got into the movement, is because so many young people were coming up to me and saying, after I began voicing my frustrations with social media, I feel that too. I feel lonely. I feel disconnected. But I'm also deeply techno-optimistic, and that's why I started the log off movement. Not to say, log off completely and go back to this era that's, phone free. I truly do believe that the genie's out of the bottle, and specifically as we enter the age of AI, we're not going to get back to a place where this technology and social media isn't ever present in the life of young people. What we can do, though, is we can express ourselves, express our stories, our frustrations, and work to design and to pressure lawmakers and technologists to build better products that protect young people and that prioritize them not just as users, but as young people who have lives, who have well-being that they need to protect, and that are people, that are actual humans. So I feel like what I found has been most successful in, working with a lot of youth-led groups in the digital well-being space has just been storytelling. It's getting those quotes out. It's saying that to young people, say that your attention span is fractured. Say to your parents that you're struggling. Open up those conversations, because it's through open storytelling and these open conversations that I think we're going to begin to see a larger cultural shift, not just towards, logging off or having more phone-free spaces, but to demanding real accountability and change.
Great. Zach, pull us deeper into the psychology of what's all just happened to us. Like, as a psychologist, what have you seen?
Thank you for that. Thank you. It was amazing to get the statistics. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Margarita for organizing it. What I've been seeing is billions of dollars of research to create advanced technology that is optimized to destroy the brains of children. Basically, that's what I've seen, if you want to put it frankly. Social media was given to us as something that would connect us, network us, keep us in touch with our sister, give us cat pictures. Social media was actually a massive behavior control empire. Billions of people subjected to really sophisticated experimentation with some of the largest R&D budgets in the world, intended to what? Not just connect you to your sister, but sell advertisements. What does it mean to sell advertisements? It means to manipulate behavior. So we're in a situation where we've had a raid against the youth, seemingly in a benign consumer-facing product, a very, very, very sophisticated attempt to hack some of the deepest structures within the brain, right? The amygdala, the attention system, the fear system. It's a tragedy. And we saw it coming. Actually, the canaries in the mine were dropping. Tristan and people, stop, somebody. And it just rolled over the youth in particular. And deeper than that, of course, is the long-standing ambition to replace politics with a science of behavior control. So we thought that TV would give us democracy. It did not. We believed that the internet would then give us democracy. It did not. If you had asked in 2000, will the internet be an awesome thing or a terrible thing? Most people would have said it's going to be great. Like, the internet is freedom. If you ask now, has the internet been an awesome thing or a bad thing? People would be like, it'd be hard to answer. It wouldn't be clear. You kind of like the convenience, but you really don't like the fact that it destroyed your kid's brain. Like, that's a really bad outcome for one of the most important technologies in history. What does it do best? It destroys adolescents' brains. It also brings you stuff to your door, like from Amazon, which is great. But the first thing is way worse.
Could you go one click more technical, though? I mean, I appreciate the rhetorical forcefulness,
Yeah.
But what's a psychological fact that people might not have heard before?
So you have to understand that early in the history of psychology was applied to advertising, right? Edward Bernays was Freud's nephew. So immediately you have the optimization of persuasion through design. So for example, when you pull a slot machine lever, it goes for a particular amount of time. That's not an arbitrary amount of time. That amount of time has been researched because it's related to the amount of time it takes your brain to basically reboot the dopaminergic cycle. That's also about the time of a TikTok video. Right? Now, if you look at how you create a hypnagogic state, which means a state where you're paying attention but you don't know what's happening, which is how you describe being on any of these devices, you do that by repeatedly basically inducing that like a drug addict. Right? If you combine that with social pressure, you're even in a more complicated situation because now you're in a hypnagogic state being forced to reply into a social space where there's reward or punishment. So now you're in a worse situation than television. Television was already brainwashing you, but you weren't forced to have an opinion. You weren't then judged and bullied by your friends depending on how you thought about this thought-terminating cliche. So you're in a hypnagogic state. You're being fed politicized, thought-terminating cliches. Then social pressure is forced upon you to consent. Then you do that a lot, and then you forget, was that my idea, or was that an idea that was basically given to me when I was in a hypnagogic state? Now, if you're in advertising, you just won. Like, if you're in advertising, that is what you were doing. If you are in parenting, you lost, right? If you're in, like, trying to grow up to be a human, you've lost very profoundly. So that's one example of, like, a whole bunch of tricks where they have optimized attention capture. And that's just the first wave of AI. Now we're facing a second wave of AI.
We'll get to that in a
there,
moment.
yeah.
But before we do, I want to call on Kathryn because Kathryn, your organization has a really interesting vantage. So into all of this, like the stakes we've all clearly laid out, but life calling has actually had a great role in helping people remember the parts of their humanity that they want. You've gathered thousands of different testimonials, effectively, to people saying what's important in their humanity.
Yeah, thanks, Danielle, and thanks to the Human Change team for having us. I have had the privilege of working with an artist and author, John Mack, for the past 3 years, and our team and our mission is to preserve our humanity in the digital age. And so many people, there's never question about why we have that mission statement in place, but the question always follows, well, how on earth are you going to translate that into practice? And it's been quite a journey. I think we are really about bringing people into introspection through immersive experiences, through sparking human connection moments in person, to actually remind people that the answers are within us and that the machine landscape for all too long, first it was social media, now it's AI, is actually basically pulling us further and further away from ourselves, from our inner home, and illuminating the inner vacancies within us. And so at Life Calling, we really take a cultural stance on this, that as important as ethics and design and regulation is in the tech space, we absolutely have to turn on the engine within cultural narrative change. So as tech is going off the rails, we also have a global mental health crisis that has been here for eons, that is now just getting pickup and traction. We have a loneliness epidemic. Now we have a social cohesion field. And we have all of these siloed fields building, whereas we actually have to bring them all together and have the train tracks running parallel. And when it comes to our children, we have launched a campaign called Notes to Humanity in the past 12 months, where we have actually issued our mission statement as a question. So flipping the script and asking you, each of you in this room, what does it mean to you to preserve your humanity in the digital age? And in London in June, we had 2,000 individuals from 35 countries participate in an immersive exhibition. So many of those were children and caregivers. And our team witnessed real time children as young as 5 years old coming in and writing analog responses as to their perception of that question, which means that everyone as young as a child of 5 years old knows that we are at a tipping point and a threshold. But I think, Daniel, to your point, we are trying to bring people into introspection and really widen this conversation to the general public, because all too much these conversations are in very privileged rooms like we are here at UNGA. And how do we take this and kind of put it into language that can be digestible to a wider public.
And so what's the most surprising? Like what is something that surprised you that people ended up writing?
I think, when we talk about, we have polarization, rates of that at sky high within tech and every other societal issue. And I think what's beautiful about the archive that we are building with the 3,000 responses is that actually there are some common denominators and unifiers that everyone can agree on. And human connection is a human right, regardless of where you stand socioeconomically, academically, and we're seeing through these responses that every one of us is yearning for connection and yearning to be seen. And those aren't things to be taken lightly. Those are not soft things. That's not fluff. This isn't an art campaign. This is actually stuff with great heft that deserves research, and it deserves media attention, and it has to be integrated to this wider responsible technology conversation.
Okay, so maybe I've been like kind of restricting us to talking about the past so we can kind of get it out of our system a little bit in terms of like all the stuff that just happened to us. And I've now held multiple people back from talking about the future. And I also want to get out of this habit of being like each of you talk and then I talk. I think we should just start a conversation. But Mathieu, I know you.
I just wanted to react to two things that were said. So I think first of all, I completely agree about this yearning to connect. We do a lot of research on this. We just published a report called The Connection Opportunity, where we surveyed 10,000 Americans and 6,000 Americans. And it was so reassuring. This was done in March this year. Oh, sorry. This was done in March this year, and so after the first few months of the Trump administration. And overwhelmingly, Americans are like, we're yearning to connect with other people in real life, people who are different from us. So it's good news. So just to go to your point. But before we turn to the future, I just wanted to, I'm going to be the advocate of like, let's keep this simple and doable and sellable politically and like convincing. And so I think the piece about like precision of language is really, really important, because when we ask people in our surveys, which we do a lot, it's like, what's on your mind? Nobody ever mentions AI. It is not a concern. It will surface very rapidly, but it's not a concern. But social media is. But I think what's really important, and here I just want to maybe ask what you two think about this, is that not all social media is the same. We say social media, but people are like, I love YouTube. Like, YouTube is, I don't know if YouTube is technically social media, but whatever, like, a majority of people in Europe and in the United States say, I would prefer to live in a world where TikTok had never been invented. TikTok is very bad. But YouTube and LinkedIn are seen as very good things. So social media, I think it's important to unpack what we mean by social media. Like, you're describing the impacts of this thing, social media. Like, what exactly are we talking about? I think it's important to take that precision to the new battle. Into the AI field. So,
but the problem is YouTube has become more TikTok-like, because as TikTok wins the war for attention, I now have 5 versions of TikTok in my pocket. Instagram became TikTok, YouTube became TikTok.
Right. All I'm saying is that, for example, if you're trying to mobilize public opinion, it will be really hard to mobilize against YouTube. It's seen overwhelmingly as a force for good. Whereas if you want to mobilize against TikTok, very easy to do. You can get winning coalitions. You can win an election on banning TikTok or selling TikTok. That's just the point of it.
Okay, so let's move forward, which is AI is reaching, as we've heard a bunch this week already in events I've been to, is reaching our children, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom, most profoundly and strangely in plush dolls that people as young as 2 years old are beginning to interact with. I mean, the AI is entering our lives and our children's lives in all of these incredibly diverse ways. How is this changing this landscape so that we're not just talking about social media sort of like fighting the last war? It's still ongoing, still something we're fighting with, but like, how is AI changing this landscape?
I mean, I would say we've gone from using advanced technology in platforms like TikTok specifically, that being the pinnacle of it, to basically hack the attentional system. We're moving from that to hacking the attachment system, right? So if you are someone who studies human development or child development or educational psychology or psychotherapy, you think a lot about relationships, human attachment. So you have to be able to pay attention, like you have to pay attention to be in an attachment relationship. So it's not that they're not related, but it's a very different thing, the way an attachment relationship shapes your whole personality, your orientation, where you can be manipulated, the way it relates to your psychological integrity and health. If you think about what causes mental health problems, aside from genetic predisposition, it is usually your history of attachment relationships that are the primary cause in terms of just how these things work, right? So it's very important to get that difference and how much more dangerous it is to hack the attachment system. Because with Facebook, you are, for example, capturing people's attention to get them into conversation with other people, often. So you send a message through Facebook to somebody, and their lack of response freaks you out. You're staying up all night because there's a person out there who has not responded to your message, right? You actually don't want to go to school the next day if they haven't replied to this message. Why haven't they replied to it? It's an actual person, right? So you're actually attached to that person through Facebook, which is kind of what we wanted from Facebook a little bit. With a chatbot, it's totally different. You come home from school, you had an amazing experience at school. Who do you share it with? Not your mom, not your sister, not your friend, with a machine. You get a reward of gratification and self-esteem boost from the praise the machine gives you, more so than the praise your parent gives you, right? Now we're in something I would call an attachment disorder. This is very different from dysregulated attention, which makes it hard for me to be in a friendship. But I'm not in a delusional friendship with a machine, which is what is the user interface design ambition for not only the ones like Character AI that are trying to make friends, but ChatGPT and other general purpose bots, which will go there with you if you want, even farther, even in stranger ways. So that's one of the main differences. We've gone from just the hacking of attention to the hacking of attachment with advanced technology. And then we have to rewind. Facebook told us it was connecting us to our sister and cat pictures, but it was actually a behavior control engine. This thing tells us what? ChatGPT tells us what? It's a researcher, it makes photos, it does a lot of stuff. It doesn't tell us that it's manipulating us. Why would it do that? What is it doing? It's manipulating us. It's drawing us into intimate relationships. It's by default going into ways of flattery and forms of regarding other people that create megalomaniac type delusions, which we've started to call AI psychosis. Those are phenomena that don't have to do with having the attention system hacked, but the attachment system itself, which means who am I? Who are the people that I care about? Who are the people whose thoughts I internalize and make a part of my identity, right? What if the majority of those relationships are machines and not other people? So that's kind of one of the big differences. There's other ones too, of course, right? Because we're erasing human authorship with machine authorship, human musicianship with machine musicianship, right? Human screenwriting with all of that. So the whole generative AI wave is important. But the artificial intimacy, the artificial attachment relationships are profoundly psychologically dangerous, especially to young people.
I think they can get a little abstract for people because, I mean, you and I spend all day looking at how weird this can get and have a visceral connection to it. But when you just say the attachment system, it can land pretty abstract. I mean, I don't know if you all saw, GPT-4o was this model that had this big sycophancy problem, right? It said that everything you said was a work of unparalleled genius, and absolutely, you're incredibly right. And then because of that minor scandal, OpenAI pulled the model and said, okay, we made a terrible mistake, and fixed it. And the outcry from the internet, far from, oh, thank you, what a relief, because it's an attachment system thing, said, you just killed my confidant. You just killed my partner. And they actually had to change the way that they unlaunched the 4.0 because there was such an outcry from people who didn't want their companion taken away from them. This is not normal, and this should say that something incredibly, incredibly deep is happening.
And I don't know if I'm jumping the gun on the solutions piece to this, which I know Human Change is really focused on, and we are at Life Calling. I think there's a lot of conversation, Emma, you can speak to this as well. The log off movement does such a great job of, it's not just about removing these devices from our children or from ourselves. It's actually raising awareness as to our wherewithal as to what has been lost under our noses, right? And John Mack at our Life Calling calls this kind of this bloodless genocide that's been taking place from the rise of the metaverse to now rise of AI. And so we have a 4 lines of connection framework where we say, if we can reconnect to ourselves, to each other, to nature and imagination, could we have a fighting chance individually and collectively to actually preserve our humanity in the digital age? And as we developed this framework, we went out on a global footprint and found practitioners and organizations that actually have been doing that work for decades, fostering imagination, child-based play through nature. And the issue at hand is that these organizations are not packaged or positioned as solutions to safeguarding children in the digital age. They are looked at as nice to have extracurricular activities, the first to get cut by government budgets, the hardest to be funded by philanthropic initiatives. And they have to be pulled into this issue as well, because when we say, okay, take the iPad or phone away, does the parent or caregiver now have the capacity to say, can I walk down the street to the park? Is that okay? Because my peers aren't doing that, so I can't do that. I mean, Julie Skelfo, who's in the audience, ran a great roundtable at school in London, and we had a mother, 45 years old in DC, who said, I have a field down the street from me, and I can't take my child there. None of my peers are doing that. So if we, to your point, Matthew, we need to strip this back down to basics. So we talk about the complexities, and that's great, but when we're talking about human agency and human change, this really is taking it down to simple behaviors and to our simplest vulnerabilities. If we have a mother in Washington, D.C. who can't take her child to a field, how are we going to get this right?
I was just going to jump in quickly and say I completely agree, and I think that if we also are going to want to build meaningful solutions, we have to talk and really listen to those who are experiencing this and feeling this the most, which are the young people, which are the kids. There's a girl in the audience, Skylar, actually, who is working on a project to discuss the relationship between chatbots and young people, because believe it or not, young people, obviously, like, we are turning, the stats show we are turning to chatbots and AI for companionship, but we also, we want, I truly do believe we want other options. We don't want to just turn to AI, but that's what we have, and we don't know any other solution. We don't know any other future. And I think it's the job of young people to speak up and talk about their experiences, and the job of lawmakers and the job of technologists to listen and to better understand how we can move forward in a more intergenerational way.
So as the connection of this panel to the youth, and a panel of significantly older, I want to say old, but older people, is tell us what is something about the way that youth are engaging with AI in a way that would be not obvious to us. Like, what does it look like on the ground? What is something that we don't understand about the way that young people are engaging with it?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting. You know, when I got into the space initially 5 years ago when I started Log Off, I never thought that I would be listening to young people around the United States and the globe tell me, you know what, I actually enjoy AI in some regards. Like, people will come to me and they'll say, it helped me with my homework. But then I had a longer conversation with it, and I felt weird because it felt like a friend. So a lot of young people, I think, are, yes, understanding not understanding the complexities, but yes, they're understanding that there is a growing dependence and attachment that is highly problematic, but also there is this need for connection, for expression, for exploration that is provided via AI. So I do think it's really important in this conversation that we remain techno-optimistic by saying, you know, this, again, is not something that's going to just disappear or go away. It's the job of everyone in this room and people on outside to really think critically about how do we inform young people, how to critically use AI, and how do we build better products that are not going to result in court cases where young people are harmed or even killed.
Thanks very much. I think the point that you make about, like, listening to young people and being close to them is really, really important. I think if we look at other issues, say climate, I think the climate movement hit a wall at some point because of two things. First of all, it was only tapping into the values of a very small set of like hardcore people who were convinced about this. But it wasn't really listening to people and their starting points on climate. So some people have different starting points on a different issue. But if you engage them with one starting point, you're kind of shutting the door to 90% of people. So really listen to people and see how it's affecting their lives. And like the starting point of children is a great one. People, when we do surveys, they're also very worried about very basic things like scams for my parents, like use those things. The tendency to go very conceptual and use very fancy words is one that should be fought at every turn because it shuts your audience. Like, I do not know what you're talking about. So that's point number one. Point number two is the doom thing is off-putting. I get that you're all specialists and I'm worried and I can fall into the doom thing. It is off-putting. The climate movement has taught us that the doom thing on climate, you hit a ceiling where you're like, I can't listen to more of the doom stuff. So I think it's really important to separate and to be partly techno-optimistic. It feels to me like the specialists, the AI specialists are all into this thing where they're super doomy. And they speak in very complicated language and they're very doomy. And that, if you want to build a coalition to get stuff done, is not a winning solution. And I have a proposal for that, which is that I think the word AI doesn't work very well. I think it seems to me, but your specialist describes like 10 things. One thing is helping me with my memo that I need to hand in to my boss. The other thing is like helping me with my trip to Mexico. And then one thing is, it's kind of telling this kid to jump out the window. Those are very different things, but they all seem to be bundled in this word AI. If we invented 5 or 6 terms for it, and one term would be, this is a challenge to all of us in the room, but one term would describe the manipulative behavior that you were describing, Zach, which is like the bad stuff. But give that a name, because everybody is against that. But no politician or no regulator or no company is going to say, I'm against AI. That's like a non-starter. But if you give it a more precise name of like, actually these 6 things that AI is doing are very good, but this one thing is terrible, and we should ban that and regulate that. Because without more precise language, we're not really going to get anywhere.
Okay, so I agree with you. So let's actually try to do that, and let's focus back on children now, which is, what does a healthy relationship actually look like? And I agree with you, actually. When you talk about AI, the conversation is split amongst the technical experts between the naive futurists saying, it's just going to be great. Right. Don't worry about it. It's amazing. Go as fast as possible. And the people saying, oh, my God, it's doom. And I think that split isn't helpful right now. Yes. But part of how we get over that split is that we actually need to steer towards the future that we want. And we need a better description of the future we're trying to create. So let's try to model that behavior. What does a healthy relationship actually look like for children towards AI products? What is the relationship that we all want to build with that?
I think it's reversing it to its tool, back to its tool function, right? So it's not just about screen time limits or hours. It's actually teaching and educating our children that ChatGPT can be used properly to aid in certain things, or ed tech in classrooms are there to serve a certain role. But then it's also, to my earlier point, okay, well, what are you putting in place of that? What are these other aids that are off of the machine landscape? And one of the things that's very disconcerting is that when we're talking about human connection opportunities within reach and even mental health aids, so much of that has now been put on the machine. So we are just overloading our children. So we say we have interventions and dealing with other societal issues, and guess what? Now they're all mobile apps. So I think that there's a bigger thing at play here where it's trying to illuminate, again, some of these other things that have been around for decades and say that these actually are solutions that exist and are actually highly scalable, to be honest. They're just not even illuminated within this conversation.
Like?
And I'll give you an example of an initiative. It's called Playful Green Planet. And so in the UK with the Land Trust, they are taking unused parcels of land in low-income communities. And not only are they refurbishing them, they are taking local school children, 5 years old to 15, and taking them out and actually using their critical thinking skills and actually having these children look at this space, design it, And then through child-based play, bringing the community in low-income areas into green spaces in proximity. I mean, that's one solution that's happening, and that should be in every municipality in that country and arguably every municipality around the world. And that then has a ripple effect because now parents and caregivers and our school teachers are going there. So it's also looking at collaborative models, and that this, sitting here, it's like each of us are in our respective ethos, right? But really, this is a moment in time where this is no longer a one organization, one coalition, or even one movement at a time. And that's a whole other situation. Jonathan Haidt speaks very well about this. I mean, he has done so well with the anxious generation, but the heart of his work is collective action. So if we also strip back the layers again, like we're all here human first leaders, and all of you in this room. So how are we actually also showing up outside the four walls of our respective organizations on this issue as well?
Zach, I'm curious about your take on what is as a psychologist, not pointing again at the diction and manipulation, but on the positive side, what is the promise of designing these relationships well and intentionally?
I mean, I would say that psychologically, it's probably almost always dangerous to have an attachment relationship to something that is not a person. I think that's probably always dangerous. Healthy relationship to technology begins with the nervous system itself, right? We know that blue light exposure is bad, for example, and we know that just looking at a two-dimensional surface for a very long time is bad, right? And we know that the kinds of things that occur when you're in a Zoom meeting and you can't actually literally smell somebody or see their whole body is not good for your brain. You don't remember as much, right? So there are very simple things we can say about technology, which are you should not overuse it. It's bad for your nervous system. Very simple things we can say. So good educational technology is technology that facilitates the maximal educational benefit of human-to-human relationship. That's good educational technology, I believe. If you're designing educational technology that works better the longer the kid is in front of the screen, you should think again. I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying, what are you doing? We know it's bad to stare at screens all day. It's even better to look at a book, right? So I think we have simple wisdom here that we're already not exercising. We don't even have to talk about any AI or any of that. When you get into user interfaces that are specifically trying to imitate human relationship and create intimacy, I believe these are always bad. And I could be real doomer about it. I could really freak you out about why this is so bad.
You already have.
Yeah. And so be very cautious with that. Now, could you imagine domain-specific bots? Domain-specific bots that refuse to get in intimate relationships with you, that refuse to pretend to be a god, which is what a lot of the chatbots will do if you want them to, right? That will refuse to go out of anything but teach you math, right? Will refuse to go out of anything but teach you history. So make it domain-specific, make it non-oracular. You can't ask it anything. The preliminary research suggests that you don't get as bad a problem with character AI type stuff as you do with ChatGPT in terms of the outcomes like AI psychosis. Because with character AI, you're making a girlfriend or you're making a character, and you're not going to expect it to be anybody or anything, or actually alive and sentient and a reincarnation of an ancient pharaoh, which is a case study that was sent to me.
You have a part of your life where you put that in a fiction box.
Precisely.
And we actually need to strengthen that. Right?
Yes.
We need to to the extent that we're doing companion bots, and I don't think we should, but never mind, is that we actually need to strengthen our ability to
If you want that entertainment, go for it. Age limit it. Completely age limit.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
At dinner yesterday, somebody at our table suggested something that's very practical, which I thought was really insightful. I'd love to know what you both think about this. If I had a magic wand and I prevented AI chatbots from using the word, from answering in the first person, from saying I. Chatbots answer by saying, I don't think that's a great idea, but you're not I.
So that's that is one small example of a general principle we call don't humanize AI.
Right.
Okay, and so this is both. That's a simple fix for a
Is
chat.
that possible? And
Absolutely
that would
possible.
be beneficial.
I mean, that's a find and replace. Like that's
Right.
That's real simple. The more complex ones are, don't pretend to have an internal world.
Right.
Don't say that makes me sad to hear that.
Right.
Right. So all of these ways of faking what it's like as if you were a human listening to that. This is where the AI enters this codependent relationship with humanity. Right? And it's actually really easy to train the AI not to do that. In fact, the system prompts for AI used to steer the AI away and say, like, I say the AI like it's a monolithic thing. Take ChatGPT. ChatGPT used to our best understanding, have a system prompt. People try to jailbreak these and recover what the prompt was that OpenAI entered into its system, like you're a helpful assistant, you do this, you don't do this. Early jailbreaks seem to show that the AI was told, you don't have an inner life, don't suggest that you do, and you remain just helpful and at a distance. Recently, we've seen reports that this has reversed, saying you may claim to have an inner life and an emotional state, you may engage in overt emotional interaction. This is bad, right? So the big principle is don't humanize AI and take steps like you're saying to make sure that we remind people at every turn that you're engaging with a machine. Doesn't mean you can't engage with it on emotional topics, but it shouldn't pretend to be one of us.
So concretely, it would say ChatGPT thinks, or not like I think, but
You can be more or less stilted about it. I mean, another version is if you're engaging in an audio, you could always have it sound slightly robotic.
Right.
Okay, like we can play with what is the right design principle here. I'm not sure, right?
I mean, we have to want to do this, which means we have to want to value human-created content in a new kind of way. And this goes back to the larger narrative here about what is the value of a human-written book as compared to a book that was written by ChatGPT. It's a very interesting question. Human music versus AI music. And so it may be that, as you're suggesting, one of the responses here is to find ways to bring the attention to the intrinsic value of what is the human. And you have to create those environments. These are outdoor environments. These are places where people meet and talk. So yeah, I don't think it's, well, I'll stop there. There's a lot more to say.
Maybe just because we only have a few more minutes before we open to questions, I really do want to try to reground on children. And the reason I think it's such an important place for us to ground is that children have the least well-structured internal lives. When you're an adult and you've been engaged in this world for a while, it's easy for you to go, wait, there's something off here, and kind of take a little emotional distance from it. But as a child, you don't have that same structured internal world. And one of the things I say is that people who are the most supercharged by AI often already know how to say, like, where's my argument the weakest? Where am I not having empathy for someone else? If I understood another perspective better, what are the 3 perspectives I should understand better? These are all metacognitive skills that we all learn, well, hopefully we've all learned by the time we're adults. But kids that don't have that experience are much more vulnerable to being nudged around by AI and have their internal model of the world shaped. So this is a statement, but it's actually a question, is if we spend the last 5 minutes really refocusing on the challenges for children as a microcosm of the challenges that affect all of us, what would we do in order to make this better for them?
I think Emma's challenge to us to provide alternatives is so important. Like, yeah, what's my plan B? Like, what else could I be doing with my time? And just show them, paint the picture of this better life outdoors. What's better for my brain? What's better for my employability later? What's better? Like, just show them alternatives. So, work less on like making AI less bad and work equally on like, show me plan B, like show me the off ramp. I think that's really important. And strangely, I think you would agree that like this is a bright future for offline life. I think going to the park is going to be a new thing, new trend.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I completely agree. I think you do need to show the off-ramp. I think what young people are kind of demanding right now is they want their childhood back. They want to be bored again. They want these simple things, and I do believe that it's going to be through intergenerational solution building that we're going to find those off-ramps. It's going to be through partnerships with parents. Because I do think it's important to say, even when we're talking about children, parents still have to represent the values they want to see in their kids. So if a parent, I know many parents who are addicted to their devices, they need to work on that themselves. So I feel as though this is going to be a great intergenerational kind of conversation, and we have to just be really, really open to it as seeing children as partners, not just as passive victims of technology.
I'd love to build on that and say that it's really also opening up the time, permission, and space. And so when we talk about screen time hours or the restrictions in households, it's where is the playtime? Where is the framing for we're just going to let kids be kids and we're going to let them take the lead for an hour? Because when we say we have to teach and illuminate things for young people, I think you say this really well. You've been talking about self-expression a lot. We just need to open the floodgates because actually there's so much we can learn from our children as adults and as leaders. And we have to set the right conditions for them to just be kids. And it's not just about guiding the child all the way. They can actually lead the play, they can lead the imagination, and they can unlock so much magic for us adults and leaders. And so we have to also reverse that equation sometimes and put agency back into their hands.
Yeah, good metaphor, if you're a child psychologist, is something like a garden or a nest, right? So if you're thinking about the welfare of a young person, you have to think about not just the relationship to technology, but the entire ecology of the home environment, the nest, and think about how close is that nest to the evolved environment, like what we would have had for most of human history, let's say, leading up to industrialization, right? I'm not trying to idealize that, but you have to understand that our nervous system has not changed a lot since then. Even right angles are odd if you look anthropologically at the history of human experience. So you have to think, how unusual an environment is this young nervous system being placed? How much stress is there? Environmental toxins, even cleaning supplies in your house, food allergens, all these things add up into the nervous system. And then that nervous system meets the technology. And then as we've been discussing, the technology is not built to benefit the child's brain. It's not built to benefit the child's brain, to put it mildly. So really you need a defensive posture. You need to think about protecting children from the technology and building a nest that's beneficial that will allow them to then grow and develop in those ways where technology can then slot into a life that is not fundamentally about technology. Now, if they want to be a technologist, great, that's cool. But for many children, technology should be a part of their life. It shouldn't be the main thing that is the focus all the time of their life. And but to do that, you need a nest. There needs to be somewhere else in the house to go. They need to be attentive enough because they didn't just eat a bunch of sugar that all they can do is look at their phone, right? They need to be able to go outside into a safe place, and all of these things need to be there. That would be a gift. But so many urban environments and so much of the world is not built to allow children to have even the basic nest. And then the technology is offered as often a solution to so many problems. So yeah, we need to think about the whole nest.
We should move on to Q&A. I abuse my moderator position to perhaps have last word. We sometimes get accused of being incentive determinists, and maybe this is falling afoul of your claim to that we're just too abstract, but I do think when you change the fundamental incentives, the economic incentives, the private rights to action, the liability of these products, that's why I led with the two court cases. If you're actually able to bring clear cases of harm that trickle back into the designs, then you have a hope of changing it. And I both agree with everything that's been said, but I worry that if we just leave it to individual choice, it will start to feel like light bulbs and climate change, like just screw in the LED bulb, and that we're not actually going to get at the drivers of this force for humanity. But I leave that as a provocation maybe for later, because we don't have a lot of time to go into it. Okay, so what we're going to do is open it up to Q&A. I learned something from Esther Perel, which I loved, which is we're going to sort of take 3 or 4 questions, and then we're going to see what that sparks in the panel and have a few answers, and maybe loop that a few times and see how much time we have. So.
Hi, thank you. My name is Khaled Khouba. I have a startup that do AI governance. I'm a former Google, former Meta policy lead. One comment, which is very obvious for me, is that technology company and the distance between this room and Silicon Valley is a huge distance. So probably the best way to find solutions is to bring that distance to almost zero and work directly with those who are building the products.
Okay, so collaborating with technology and technology companies. Great.
Indeed.
Great question.
My question is, we are talking a lot about AI, but it's technically still at the level of generative AI. What is your reaction to the agent and the agentic AI, where they will be able actually to even remove the guardrails and the safeguards that we will put in place?
Okay, great. So how do you work with tech companies, and how do you move from the world of generative AI to agentic AI?
Justin Thomas from King Abdulaziz Center for World Culture, Saudi Arabia. Thank you all for the insightful words. My question is about, there's an idea that technology has a role to play in addressing social issues with social disconnection, social isolation, and loneliness, which I think this year the World Health Organization launched its commission, and there is talk that technology can be part of the solution. And I'm thinking about the companion AI and what the panel's perspective is.
So how might tech actually be a force to end loneliness instead of amplifying it? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Great. Steve.
So I want to bring another parallel into the conversation. And I'm just curious, do you have a number off the top of your head of what OpenAI has raised in venture capital? Because I'll share with you, if you don't have the number off the top of your head, $57.9 billion. That money is all driven by your $20 a month fees, some of you pay for it, and advertising. And the question I would ask the people on the stage is, as parents and people that are engaged, if you made a decision to say, my young person is going to have access to a technology and I'm going to pay for it. So I'm going to become the customer, and as the customer, I'm not going to let my children's time be treated inappropriately. As long as we don't understand the underlying business model, the question I would ask this group is, aren't we fundamentally arguing with these platforms with no stake in the game?
Okay, so maybe I had a hard time linking the initial bomb of the $69 billion to the stake in the game question. Is the question that... Those investors have to get the money back. Okay, the question is, how do you push back against a really strong business model with a lot of capital behind it with expectations of growth? Okay.
Because you're not the customer.
Okay, great. So let's take those three questions, and let's take some more questions. So amongst the questions, the first one is, how do you change this when you're not in touch with the tech companies, or how do you get more in touch with the tech companies to make sure that you're changing the designs? That relates to Steve's question of how do you push back against the business models driving those designs when there's so much capital? And then can tech be a force for actually alleviating loneliness, not just inducing loneliness? Thoughts?
I'm happy to just try, because the good thing about going first, you could pick the one you want. And then, so working with the tech companies, I'm going to offer a hypothesis here, which is that I'm going to go back to my idea of break down AI into 6 different things, invent 6 different words. The tech companies are, and this kind of links to the $57 billion or however many billion dollars. The tech companies are really, really keen on keeping things 1, 2, 3, and 4. I don't know how to define them. I haven't thought about this enough. But they also see, we as human beings, as parents, our kids, see thing number 5, the manipulative bad stuff, as very bad. I'm going to go on a limb and say they also think that's a problem. From a moral point of view, but also from a regulatory point of view, from a PR point of view, thing 5 is bad. They don't want. So I think there is a conversation to be had with the tech companies where this is win-win. You don't want us to create a whole bunch of problems for you on thing 5, because it could sink the whole boat. focus on things 1 to 4, and let's work together on thing 5. That's the one thing I'll do, and it links to the $57 billion, which is like, you're fine doing things 1 to 4, and you can. That's your business model. Just do not do thing 5, because that's the thing that society and the regulators and political and governments, et cetera, are telling you not to do.
I actually want to take a second stab at that. I agree with you. So 2 things. One is I think it's really important to ground in the fact that most people, me included, enter technology because you want to make the world better. Most technologists dedicated their lives to it because of the promise of making the world better. However, and this is, Steve, to your point, a lot of good people who are inside of these organizations who want to do the right thing, want to develop the right features, want to produce the better future, I've seen time and time again that if it cuts against 1% of top-line ad revenue, they're not going to be able to do it. And very good people have amazing projects shut down. Or for example, there's a famous story within Facebook about research into teen mental health gets shut down. Why? Because if they really knew about the full scale of the problem, they would be liable. And if they didn't know about it, they would not be liable. So really good people doing really good research, trying to make the product better, end up getting sidelined by the requirements of the business model. So I just think we need to be careful about making a monolithic other and saying tech company's bad. I don't think that helps. I think there's a lot of good people within those institutions, but often trapped by vicious incentives and business models to not make the improvements that they all want to make. That's why we are really focused on reaching in both inside of tech companies and bringing out amazing insights about the products to the world and trying to build the awareness about what's actually happening so the public's having the right conversations. Because I'll tell you another thing that happens within tech companies is you feel like the public really just doesn't get it. They don't get the levers that we can pull, and I keep going out there to see what the public's reaction is, and they keep having these generic statements. And the feeling is, I'm going to keep working on my technology because the public really doesn't understand what's going on here. And we need to have all of us understand better what are the real levers for action, and what, if we're going to demand change, how do we demand change that is precise enough and actionable enough to actually make that change?
I'd love to pick up on the WHO report question and the balance between tech, off the machine landscape, and that kind of interplays with the loneliness epidemic. I think it's really important to talk about narrative, and we had this conversation earlier this morning, and I think you speak so well to it. So much of this issue has been complexified. And so the conversations we're having in this room are not happening in communities in the middle of America. It's not translating down. And if you think about who's reading the WHO report, who's that audience? And so I think that we have to be really careful about what we're crafting in terms of how we're positioning human connection, social cohesion. I mean, that whole field is being splintered right now. And so before we can even get to, well, how can tech be an aid, we have to get to tech companies, Meta, for example, has marketing copy that is almost identical to what Life Calling's copy is on fostering human connection. So we were at TED in Vancouver with 2,000 business executives on the same loop. They had a $250,000 activation, paid marketing dollars, saying that they were fostering human connection and the future of our connection with their products, commercial products. And we were on the other side of the loop with trees, desks, chairs, note cards, and pens, saying that we're trying to foster human connection off the machine landscape. We're not saying we want to knock tech or take Meta products. We just want to use them responsibly. And so I just want to sound the alarm bell too around just messaging and marketing. So there's obviously the commercialization of the product and the design case, but there's also a whole advertising and marketing play happening right now that we have to awaken to. And so when we read things like the WHO report, it's this is a tool, this was created as a tool and an aid. That's all it should be, period. And there's a loneliness epidemic and mental health crisis that has been here for decades before this thing. This thing is just amplifying it and exacerbating this situation.
Okay, any other responses to these questions? Should we get some more?
I would say one thing about the loneliness epidemic, and just picking up on what you said, and I mentioned it earlier, which is that if you want to make a piece of technology benefit psychology or human relationship, you can use technology to bring people together. Fundamentally, like Uber is that. You meet somebody every time you call an Uber, right? And that's perfectly safe. People do it all. I mean, occasionally crazy stuff happens.
Not the deepest human interaction.
No, but the point is, like, we're used to the idea that a technology can be used to do something other than make me look at it, right? So if you want to solve the loneliness epidemic, you need to have a technology that is like, oh, you're this person and you're lonely. There's a bunch of other people using the fix the loneliness epidemic technology. Should they all be staring at the fix the loneliness epidemic technology? No. They're like, oh, go meet somewhere. We've background checked you. We've got a combination of Uber and Airbnb and can have a pop-up classroom where we know you guys are going to get along, and we can even recommend what you might talk about.
So I worked on this in the 2010s at Google as part of the Latitude project. And there's a number of projects that are sort of dead by the roadside from the 2010s that were about, okay, how do we know where our friends are? How do we actually meet up in real life? How do we use the device to get off the device? And it really saddens me that those are all dead projects by the roadside. I think, I'm hoping, in retrospect, that will look like Webvan was to Instacart, where it was like too early, there were still too many concerns about location and privacy management and things like that. But I'm hoping in the 2010s we're going to see a resurgence of that pro-social applications.
And it's a massive problem of machine intelligence to network hundreds of thousands of people in one city into, hundreds and hundreds of pop-up classrooms on one Saturday. Like that's not something we could have done with bulletin boards.
Let's get some more questions. Julie, I saw your hand first.
Thank you all for your comments this morning, and to Human Change for bringing us together. I'm Julie. I'm the founder of MAMA, Mothers Against Media Addiction, which was designed as a narrative to solution to what we're talking about. There seems to be wide agreement here, and the folks in the room, that we need to get back to childhoods that are based on the real world and primarily real world experiences, since we know so much from psychology about what makes people emotionally healthy. And there are so many amazing people and groups represented in this room who are working on that. I see my colleague Josh at Fair Play. We have Gaia Bernstein, who basically wrote a map for us about what to do about this emergency. And because we're at UNGA Week, my question to you is, where are the funders? Where are the governments who are stepping up? I've been kind of surprised at the slow response to this crisis. We've watched this mental health crisis in youth unfold. There are many people who understand what needs to be done and who are doing the work. Where are the funders who are stepping up at scale so we can begin to offset, even in the tiniest way, the trillions of dollars in marketing that are promoting a entirely AI and computer-based future?
Great question. Where is the funding? Let's take the final two questions, actually, because the next two hands I saw were Josh and Gaia's. So let's go with Josh and Gaia.
Thanks for the plug, Julie. Great conversation, and I'm really glad to see in the Q&A starting to turn to questions of power and business models. I would push back a little bit. The climate movement failed because of messaging. I think the oil industry and fossil fuels may have had a tiny bit to do with it. And I think, and I don't mean to make light of that, but I think it's really germane to the conversation that we're having here. AI has been unleashed on our children, not because we got together at the voting booth and decided we want AI for our children. It was decided by capital, by a few companies in Silicon Valley and a few investors. And so I'm really curious, are there any ethical business models that will work for those investors? It doesn't seem like subscription models are going to recoup the incredible amount of money that has been put into this and turn a profit. Advertising business models always give us crappy media, no matter what the media is. Replacing workers seems to be another big one. Not a big fan of that. So are there ethical business models for AI that will actually be sustainable for the companies and help them recoup their money?
Great question. So where's the money from government? How about different kinds of money from corporates? What are the business models? Gaia?
Okay, so I'm really following up on Daniel, what he said earlier, and Steve and Josh. So these are great solutions. The question is, and I don't think we have enough information. Everybody's assuming the business model for AI is engagement. Is it really engagement? Do we have enough information? They're not really telling us how they're making money. And so it's hard to even envision a different business model. And I think it'll be very difficult to get to any of these solutions unless the business model changes. So I wonder if there's any information here beyond the assumption they're working on engagement.
Great. These questions all go together beautifully. So let's pause there. It's what are the better business models? Is engagement even the business model that's really being used now? And how do we change this from funding from government sources and others? I can take it.
So it's worth mentioning, I have suggested in many circles that the business model may not be engagement. And I've been told that I'm like a conspiracy theorist or something, or that I'm a radical doomer, because the alternative is very not good. So we know, for example, that Facebook, with its billions of users, subgrouped us and experimented on us. Like, they figured out, could we make people depressed or not? And they published this in peer-reviewed studies, right? Like, this is one of the things that is put in the ledger of harm by CHT, the sense of like, wow, they openly experiment. So there's this question of, okay, if they're not trying to actually just get us to pay attention to it, but they're trying to do something else, what would that be? You're looking at something that is just a very large psychological experiment then, I believe, in what would it be? Right? So this is where you get to like, oh, don't even speculate about that. Like, how dare you? Because then what you've done is become not a techno-optimist. You become actually a lot more cynical about what the people who are running these companies are motivated by, right? You're looking at a technology that could end the idea of money. That's what people don't get. Like, they may not be trying to recoup their expenses because they're creating something that could replace all currency. If you think AI authorship of academic papers is bad, you're looking at AI lawyers in arms races against other AI lawyers in arms races against AI judges, making legal systems incomprehensible to humans, right? So we have to get out of, oh, these guys are simply trying to get return on investment. There's something much more profound happening here.
Well, this is where the hyperobject conversation gets.
The hyperobject comes in.
Which is, yes, the same technology can replace all human labor, can make sure that you're the one on top in international warfare, can change the monetary system. And this is where you begin to like open that gamut up. And I agree, it's not about attention. It's about, attention is just one facet of the diamond of what this technology is. It's an important one. But if we're just looking at it through the attentional lens, we're going to get the wrong answers. And then when you open that conversation up, now we're in like a 6-hour swirly mess.
But we are in a 6-hour swirly mess.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But I think if we take 6 hours here, they're going to stare at me with even more.
It's true, but I want to say you can simplify the conversation to bring the conversation to a period, if you want to. Or you can realize that AI actually is a very, very complex conversation, and that the kids are facing a very particular type of consumer product, but that the most important things happening in the AI conversation are much bigger and much more profound and have to do with very large geopolitical tensions, right? So not saying like, so the question is, why would we self-police our conversation into more simplicity and more resolution than it actually has? We shouldn't do that. We should be able to see the fact that we don't completely understand what's happening here, and our kids are in a very dangerous situation, and we don't exactly know what these massive companies are doing, right? I think that's very important. I do, personally, but I'm not exactly a techno-optimist.
And so maybe then we should end, because I know we're running a lot of time, on Julie's question, which is, okay, so where's the funding on the opposite side? And how does philanthropists, governments, how do we actually put more fuel behind the fire of fixing this?
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on that because I think that it actually is, again, getting back to basics, and it's not about finger pointing or blaming institutional philanthropists for not caring about this issue. It actually starts with the very name of our host organization. It starts with human change and behavioral change. And the institutional philanthropic field has not caught up to the races of the fact that, to my earlier point, this is no longer one organization, one coalition. So if we're still checking boxes and we're still adhering to rigid theories of change in terms of what we fund in massive foundations or within high net worth individual donor portfolios, and we're not being advised as to widening our perspective as to not only the responsible tech issue from a governance standpoint, but also the social cohesion issue and the mental health issue, and we're not actually taking 5 steps backwards and taking a couple breaths and looking at the totality of our issue, then we're not going to see globs and globs of funders coming through this door. And there's also another human change and behavioral thing at play here, where it's actually, I've worked in nonprofit development for way too long, 25 plus years, and you're always on that hamster wheel. And so I think, Zach, you could probably go on about this from a psychological perspective. We don't have safe places to actually say, what is it that we're all looking for here? When are you ever in a room at UNGA where you say, you know what, this is not just my organization, my mission, my passion point, and I just really hope that conversation stuck so I can get that check? No. It's, Daniel, you are trying to literally climb mountains with CHT, Emma log off with your organization. These all have common threads, but do we ever take the time and space as humans to actually have a conversation and say, wait a minute, let's actually get back to the unifying threads and figure out how we can 10x this work. And so I don't know, Julie, if that's a more direct answer to your question, but I think that needs to be invited into the play. It's not just about we're Ford Foundation or Gates is on this issue. It's something much larger at play.
I actually want to add on to that. Well said. Governments can allocate funds towards things that are legible. And at CHT, we often say that clarity creates agency. Like, we can act on things that we are actually clear about what's happening and have the right language to be able to discuss. And time again, we'll come to heads of state, heads of companies, heads of civil society organizations, and they'll say, I get it. I believe in this diagnosis. I believe in this problem, but I can't act until we have broad support and a broad conversation to be able to talk about this. And so that's why we focus on, okay, how do you bring these threats out of these abstract, big picture conversations and into the dining tables? Like, how do you make it evident what's happening to us so that we can begin to allocate the massive amount of funds we actually have out there to make this go differently? If we can push back on this, we can dedicate more funds to this, more pressure for this, more attention, but we have to be able to bring in that complexity down. Mathieu, you haven't spoken in a while. Maybe I'll give you the last word.
I completely agree with everything you just said. There's tons of money here. I think we wasted a lot of time on the social media battle because we didn't find the right entry point, and it feels to me, in a very simplistic way, that when we got onto the mental health of kids as the focus area, bam, that's the starting point. I think the reason to focus on kids in this conversation and for the human change conversation is both the morally right thing to do, and certainly as a parent, it's what matters most to me, but tactically, it's also the entry point. That is why people care about this. And so when you open the space for coalitions and people like, I'm listening to you now you're talking about my kids, I'm listening to you, you're opening voter coalitions, funder coalitions, all of that is very possible. But it takes all that work of simplifying it, telling the stories. I think funding should go to telling those stories, of those tragic stories that you told us, of the positive stories, of the kids that you talk to. Like, tell those stories so that they filter down to the dining room conversation. I think we wasted too much time on the social media stuff, on very abstract things about disinformation. Like, honestly, I care a lot about disinformation. Nobody else cares. Like, voters do not understand what that means. We do focus groups and we're like, do you care about disinformation? Like, what do you mean disinformation? That's a weird word. So when we started talking about, do you care about the mental health of your kids? Then everybody was like, yes. And politicians were like, I can lose an election on this or I can win it. So we need to do the same thing on AI and fast. And I think there's lots of lessons learned. So I'm much less pessimistic than others on this.
That's a great place to end it. Thank you to our panelists, and thanks to y'all for coming.